Live from the sun-drenched cobblestones of the Eternal City, conversation crossing faith, culture, and current events. Civil discourse, civil debate, and the free exchange of ideas. This is Intersections with Bree Dail and Matt Dooley. Now your hosts, Bree and Matt.
And good morning from Rome. It's a sunny day today here in Rome, 70s degrees today, beautiful outside. This is the all-new Intersections, crossing faith, culture, and current events with Bree Dail and Colonel Matt Dooley. For those of you who are joining the first time, I am an internationally accredited journalist, including accreditation to the Holy See as the Rome correspondent for the Epoch Times. And you may also find me on Catholic World Report, and I've contributed to National Catholic Register and other outlets. And I hold a BA in history from Christendom College and a master's in foreign policy and diplomacy from the prestigious Norwich University. I am also a veteran naval officer, and I am joined by my co-host, Colonel Matthew Dooley, U.S. Army retired. Matt, it's a privilege as always. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Bree. Good to be here.
So before we start to dive into the three sections that we usually cover, which is news discussing the church and how that's connected to that which is in politics and current events and also culture, can you please just kind of give us a bottom line up front or a bluff on your background? Because I think it's going to be incredibly important today as we discuss and continue to discuss the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Yeah, I graduated from West Point with a Bachelor of Science back in 1994. I was commissioned an armor officer. My Bachelor of Science was in military history and systems engineering, so I got kind of both bookends, wide education. I have a Master of Military Art and Science from Commanding General Staff College, which focuses on strategic thinking and a lot of what we're talking about now. I also was an instructor for a time at the National Defense University. As a joint combined warfare school instructor, and one of the electives perspectives on Islamic radicalism, something I was asked to teach. You've got to understand what motivates your enemy. And that's not to say that all Muslims are the enemy, but those who are the folks who've been fighting for the last 20 years certainly have a fundamentalist perspective and look at some of the 7th century hadiths to justify what they do. And if you're smart enough to understand that you should look at what the enemy says about themselves and what motivates them and why they do what they do. It makes sense to look at the Quran and the Hadiths that they cite routinely to justify what they do. That certainly gives one perspective if you're trying to understand what motivates folks like the Taliban or ISIS or Al Qaeda, and they all have different shades of differences and why they do what they do.
And yeah, we're going to talk about that too, because there is a lot in the news to unpack on the withdrawal and the countries surrounding Afghanistan and who's taking in refugees, Muslim refugees, majority of them, and who are rejecting them from Muslim countries. But before we begin, Matt, I'm going to kind of backtrack. We're going to talk a little bit of what's been going on in the church in this section, and then we're going to put most of what we're going to talk about in the second section on the politics of what we've been seeing in the last week. So for those of you who are just joining us, this section is going to be talking about what we're seeing in the way of current events in the church, news affecting the church this week. So a lot has happened over the last week. There have been lots of rumors circulating, and one is, and this is mostly on social media, the Papal Resignation. A potential based off of these rumors. They're saying the Pope has been planning for a while to resign, or he might have to resign because of illness. And then there's also rumors saying that he is dying, right? So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. And then also traditional communities, such as the Institute of Christ the King, the FSSP, those who really minister to the traditional Latin Mass communities. Supposedly that rumor has spread throughout social media that they were called by the Pope to Rome to discuss the future of their communities. That has been proven false this week. And then Cardinal Cupich of Chicago, reportedly through a video from a priest, forbade this priest and others in his archdiocese to say the St. Michael prayer and a Hail Mary after Mass. That ends up being incorrect as well. So how do we break through this, this disinformation, even when it comes from like a firsthand source? How do we figure that out? So I'm going to hit that a little bit, Matt. But first, great news. Cardinal Burke, he penned an update himself this week and a note of gratitude to all those who are praying for him. Now, for those who have been kind of following Cardinal Burke, who has been a big supporter of freedom of choice when it comes to this current vaccine that is targeting the COVID virus. He himself ended up having getting COVID, and then he ended up being in the ICU, intubated. And he was reported last week to have been taken off the ventilator, removed from ICU, and through his official sources this week, including himself on his social media, he came out and he said, "Thank you very much for your prayers. Continue to please just refer to my social media and the social media that's connected to the Guadalupe Shrine for official words for any updates on my health. It's going to be a long road." He does have a long road, so we need to keep praying for Cardinal Burke. But he's doing well, and that I have confirmed directly as well. So I'm really happy to pass that good news because we always hope for people to recover from this virus. But Matt, one of the things that really kind of irks me, not just within the Catholic community, but within the larger mainstream media, are reports based off of rumors, right? And I think that has grown probably in the last 3 to 4 years, simply based off of, the back and forth from our former president, President Trump, with the media drawing attention to disinformation being pushed in the mainstream media. But the response, unfortunately, was, well, if we can't trust the mainstream media, which I have a kind of mantra saying, never trust, always verify. Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. I'm saying no. At this point, don't trust anything, always verify. I ask people to do the same with my media. Keep me accountable to factual evidence, because we're human and we are all biased just by the nature of who we are. We're human beings. But when it happened that the President Trump really put focus on the fact that there was fake news coming out and disinformation coming out and coordination of that fake news coming out of the mainstream media, what that ended up doing was that it put a huge vacancy on alternatives, right? And so we started to see this movement, Matt, of new media popping up. We were involved with new media as well, popping up, but not a lot of people having the wherewithal or knowledge on how to push through disinformation, especially at the speed of light of, the 24-hour news cycle. So, Matt, what are some of the pointers, if you were to give a bottom line up front to our listeners out there, what are some pointers that you would give based off of your experience looking at psyops and manipulation of media to discern disinformation to the layman? Like, what would you suggest?
That's a really, really good question. There's quite a lot to unpack in your discussion of what we've seen over the last few years. The first thing is recognize that democratic republics cannot survive without informed populations. In order to hold our leaders accountable, in order to make informed judgments about who to vote for, about what you support as far as a political policy, you've got to bear the burden as the voter to go out and inform yourself. If you're counting on someone else to tell you what to do, you're already behind the power curve. So the responsibility is on you, even with a clean and perfect media. The idea that you're going to be beholden to an all-knowing government already sets you up for conditions for failure. When that government then co-opts the media, because from the media perspective, they throw in their cognitive bias behind one political party or the other, then you've got two people working against you, or two agencies working against you. So
and can I break in real quick? that's also really important to note, because it doesn't only have to be the politics of, say, secular president or politics in the secular world, but that's also the case within the Catholic Church. We do see polarizations, and both sides think they're right. But we know that when it comes to this type of thing, if you start to have confirmation bias, i.e. only listening to one side making arguments, then you end up losing the battle of logic, because that's not how civil discourse works. And that's not how we grow philosophically. It's not how we grow theologically. You do have to have that kind of tension, but intellectual tension, and wherewithal enough to ask the questions and continue to ask for proof, and not to do it in such a way where you're attacking the individual, because Matt, one of the things that has really kind of surprised me within Catholic media is this sense of, when you question someone's reporting, whether it's left or right, and I see it on social all the time, when you question someone's reporting, somehow that equates to questioning the person or causing division or whatnot, when it's simply saying, okay, well, you've reported this publicly on public platforms. It's like CNN or New York Times. If you report it, you publish it, then your name's on the byline. It's not just for accolades, it's also for accountability. So you say that the people have to be informed. So if you have something like rumors of a papal resignation, how do you inform yourself to whether or not that's true or not? How would you inform yourself?
You're going to have to look at multiple sources. You're going to have to develop a skill set, and it's not natural. Develop a skill set to be able to hold competing and opposite ideas in your head at the same time. There's critical thinking skills that you have to develop, and it's okay to question why or to ask for the facts behind something. Doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you're seeking information so you can make an informed opinion, and candidly, the truth is going to be somewhere in between a lot of the perspectives that are out there. I like to say that truth is actually a mathematical formula. It is fact plus context. Recognize that some people are throwing facts at you and providing either no context or biased context. And so to form the better context, you're going to have to look at multiple different sources. That takes time. It takes some effort. But unfortunately, that's the status of the times. I look at a lot of different media sources. I just don't sit and look at one cable news source. I don't just go to one news aggregator. And you got to recognize that some of the algorithms, if you're only beholden to social media, the algorithms are shaping based on your previous clicks what it thinks you want to see. So exactly. You may have to get out of your own echo chamber. And yeah, that's hard.
It's really hard.
When you hear other competing ideas, you have to be patient enough to go, okay, wait a minute. Is there some fact and some truth behind this? And it takes some time.
Yeah, Matt, it's really hard. And I would say that one of the things that I would recommend for those who are looking at different sources is actually question whether or not the journalists are doing the same. When you're reading or you're listening to, like, say, CNN or Fox News, are they citing only their own reports? Are they citing themselves? Are they going out and citing, other reporting outlets that are completely contradictory to their line of thought or reasoning or their political bias? Are they citing them in support of their reporting? If they're doing that, if you see a journalist doing that, I will recommend one, Catherine Herridge. She's amazing in that. She cites oftentimes either competing outlets, or she cites directly from the sourcing itself, with copies of documents highlighted. That's her thing. She highlights documents, that's firsthand knowledge. That's firsthand sourcing. If you can look to that and then you see others reporting around that who are hitting other angles, it's usually pretty accurate. So Matt, we're going to get back in a moment, because I think, talking about all of these rumors and how to discern disinformation, we're going to be going into what we're seeing within the media right now, covering the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and some of the fallout from that this week. Stay tuned with us. We look forward to talking to you on the other side of the break.
Does Jesus condemn praying the rosary in Matthew 6:7 when he says, as the King James renders it, use not vain repetitions as the heathens do? Protestants think so. What's the Catholic response? First, Jesus is not condemning repetitious prayer per se. If he were, well then he would be condemning himself, since, according to Mark 14:39, he prayed multiple times, Father, remove this cup, not what I will, but what you will. But that's absurd. So what was Jesus condemning? He was condemning Gentile prayers, which were mindless, repetitious prayers, as the Greek text suggests. The Gentiles recited prayers only to appease their gods. They were, as the ORSV translates it, empty phrases, having nothing to do with expressing one's love for the gods. That's what Jesus is condemning, not the repetitious prayer of the Rosary. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
We all know children have a natural innocence and a sense of wonder. Yet our world is full of distractions that can pull families in the wrong direction. But with the help of God and a church family, your children can grow in the security of faith, hope, and love. Weekly Mass provides that critical faith foundation needed in life. So if your family hasn't been to Mass in a while, we'd like to invite you home. Discover more at CatholicsComeHome.org.
And welcome back to Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events with Bree and Colonel Matt Dooley. So Matt and I were talking on the first half of this program about disinformation and some of the rumors that are circulating in Catholic media and social media right now, including, is the Pope going to be resigning, or is he having to resign, or is he dying? There's lots of rumors. National Catholic Register has covered the rumor that was countered actually in the last few days about Cardinal Cupich of Chicago forbidding reportedly prayers after Mass, and then traditional communities called to Rome by the Pope in order to discuss the future of their orders. I have posted the reality of the situation, which is and the Institute of Christ the King had their general chapter this past week, and the FSSP and others have been discussing with the other heads, their future, but not with Pope Francis. So, Matt, we're going to be talking a little bit about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, because this is an area of concern, I think, as veterans of this war that you and I both have. I've been working alongside other veterans for the last few weeks, actually successfully getting individuals who are Afghanistan or Afghan citizens or those who have special visas because of their work with the U.S. government, with the U.S. military, including interpreters and interpreters' families. They are oftentimes, the special visa leads them to becoming American citizens. Out of Afghanistan through various means, including one particular operation that's being done right now with veterans called the Pineapple Express. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been seeing and what we can say about what we've been seeing. But before we get to that, Matt, protests continue this week. There was a protest just a few days ago on the European Green Pass, which is pretty much required now for anybody who wants to go inside gyms, anybody who wants to go eat inside restaurants. You have to show this pass showing that you've had a test, a COVID test, you've been cleared for 48 hours, or you've been vaccinated. The thing is that now conversations on the street are turning to lockdowns again. And I'm interested because I don't have an ear to the ground so much in the United States, but I'm hearing that's also taking place in Washington, D.C. Matt, what have you heard?
I think it varies state by state, governor by governor. That's what's different this year versus last year. There seems to be a more informed grassroots sort of difference between policies. Washington, D.C. can talk about what it wants to do in a color and tone that looks a lot like last year, but there's a difference now. There's a population that's largely been vaccinated. The Delta variant may spread more easily, but seems to be less fatal. So you're looking at the die rate versus the infection rate. So to that end, there's still a scientific argument going back and forth between experts, quote unquote experts, and epidemiologists. Unfortunately, we do still have some efforts to silence those on social media who have a critical perspective on what should be done, and that's unfortunate. But I think it's going to be harder for the federal government to impose draconian measures. They may encourage, that they may push for ideas and advocacy, but I think the governors are more attuned to their role in this than just 18 months ago.
So, Matt, I have a friend of mine who is looking to come to Rome from Lebanon, and she literally just sent this to me because she's trying to figure out if she even has a flight in now, because this is just coming down in the last, I would say, 24 hours. This is a document that was sent to her. 2 officials within the European Union institutions have confirmed, and this is from Reuters, that the EU Council will on Monday, today, announce its decision to remove from the list of epidemiological safe third countries a total of 6 countries, including the United States. So that is saying anybody who has the ability to travel from the United States will no longer be able to do so, be let into these countries. The removal from the list means that member states are advised to reimpose the entry ban on travelers from these countries so that the same are no longer eligible to enter restriction-free for non-essential purposes like tourism or business. So imagine, I mean, really, from what I've been seeing from early reports over the summer, in Italy, they are down nearly 95% from their normal tourist economic growth. They're down that much. They've only had 5% of what they had expected in the way of growth this year. So that, I mean, that's massive. That's like, I don't even know where did they even get the idea for how many, people are going to show up for travel. And that was so way off. Maybe it's just due to fear. Maybe it's due to propaganda. But it says, according to Reuters, the decision on reimposing the entry ban on U.S. travelers have been taken on Friday, August 27th, but will be officially announced early on Monday, August 30th. The complete list of countries affected goes as follows: Israel, Kosovo, Lebanon, Montenegro, and it goes and continues. So it's interesting. Israel, which has, I think, its population like near 90% vaccinated, to the point where we've been seeing on social media videos of lines for people getting their third or booster shot at this point. Matt, before we go further, what do you think on this? So now Europe is looking to ban entry, and we know that President Biden had announced a few weeks ago, before this withdrawal took up pretty much all of the news, the news hours. He had announced that there would be also bans of flights from certain countries into the United States again, into different airports. Matt, is there a way to kind of is there a way that a government may not impose federal lockdowns, say, inside a country? Because we know that, like you said, Americans, we're not going to really stand for that, but affect the economy in such a way where lockdowns from flights, which are regulated by the federal government, will occur and basically keep people from, moving.
I guess the question is, does the federal government have the ability to put those kind of constraints in place? And the answer to that is obviously yes. But where I would go to the center of gravity of the argument is what's missing here, and it's lack of standardization. And by that I mean, what's the standard to which we are aspiring to for controlling the disease? And those goalposts have continuously moved.
Right.
I consider myself a fairly informed person. I can't tell you what the ultimate objective is. Is it 0 infections? Is it a targeted 0 death rate in a particular demographic? I can't tell you. And that's because folks like Dr. Fauci and others have kind of slid the scale back and forth about what was expected. and what should be expected. And I get that because we were grappling 18 months ago with a disease with which we were very unfamiliar. But we've got enough experience. We know the rules of the game now. So what's the standard for control of this disease that we expect?
And I think, Matt, that's a question before you go on to your second point. I think that's a question that has to continuously be asked. And if you only have one side of the argument in the medical community, you don't have the scientific method to do so. And so I think that there are more calls for medical experts to come to the table and debate this out, because you and I both have experience in defense support of civil authorities when it comes to biological, radiological, nuclear, threats. The fear has kind of started to wear off, even with the Delta variants and others. I think people are starting to get tired of the fear mongering. And so if you can't control a group of citizens because of the fear of unknown, now that we have a little bit of knowledge, where do they go from here? And then, hit your second point.
Yeah. Back to that is that, people will do things in extraordinary circumstances if they understand that this makes sense and there's some standardization about how we're going to deal with it. Back to the masks. That's a can of worms debate I don't want to open up, but I'll just offer you this. So much of what we've been told to wear a mask and never came with any expectation or enforcement of a standard. The N95 mask largely will preclude viruses from moving in and around. Okay, but everybody else can wear anything, and that's all over the world. So you have, I would venture to guess, 90% of the folks out there wearing something else besides an N95 mask. It could be a respirator or a gaiter or one of those disposable surgical masks, and it doesn't prevent anything. It may keep spittle from flying out of your mouth, but in the end, is that effective at all? Does that matter, or is it just really sort of a comfort blankie that we all carry with us, so we can show visually to everyone else that we're trying to do something? And I think that starts to wear thin on people because instinctively they know it's BS. So lack of standardization for the things that we can put in place that are scientifically effective, that's been absent, or at least argumented and gone back and forth. And that's frustrating, and I think folks are sick of it.
So, Matt, we talked about lack of standardization. We're going to move on because that's something that you and I have both been seeing with this withdrawal. So lack of standardization, lack of communication between a State Department and DOD. That is something that I myself have experienced this past week. State Department was involved early on, individuals in the State Department really active, very hoping that, they could step up to what was already recognized as a disaster of an announcement, giving our enemies and those enemies of freedom information about when we were going to withdraw and how we were going to do it. All of that was a disaster, and yet the people at on the ground level were working night and day to try to fix this, to try to answer this, to bridge the gap. Anywhere from veterans like you and I to people who are active duty, military, State Department employees. Around the clock working on this until about, I would say, 72 hours ago, when we started to hear that the State Department employees no longer had communication on the ground. And DOD was reporting to us, those who were on the ground, saying, we cannot let anybody inside the airport without a senator or even the president of the United States himself authorizing this. This was coming directly from the ground. I will be reporting on this because I was experiencing this. I'm going to be interviewing directly one of the interpreters we got out of country and other veterans who've been directly involved in this. Matt, we've been seeing private entities at this point seeking to bridge this gap, flying from the United States, private charter planes over to get people out. And I know that a lot of people are really concerned about the Christians in Afghanistan. But when it comes to, and I am too, but when it comes to the level of what the United States looks at in getting people out, we don't even have we were still having to deal with U.S. citizens not being able to get to the airport. And then we have special visa employees, people who were guaranteed the chance to be able to live in the United States and work in the United States, they weren't getting out. So individuals who had not been vetted at all, who claimed themselves to be Christian, they were kind of on the bottom level of this pool of people we were trying to get, but we were trying to get as many people out as possible. So Matt, one of the things that have really been very frustrating to us is watching this unfold and then hearing of an ISIS attack reportedly against our men and women Marines who lost their lives. A sailor lost their lives this week. People had just been photographed with babies, who had been put out. We saw this, harrowing pictures coming out of Afghanistan of mothers handing over their children over barbed wire gates. Some of the Marines who were holding those babies ended up being blown up. And our president, there was a video of him greeting these Marines being unloaded, ceremoniously from the airplane and checking his watch. I know that you're frustrated on this. I do want to hit some of the countries that are accepting these people. But Matt, your thoughts on what we've been seeing? We have literally 24 hours left before I think we're going to see some pretty scary pictures out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, I'll first start with the images of our soldiers, sailors, and Marines making stuff happen at the Kabul airport. Those will be the enduring images, I think, that are positive. I read a quote this weekend that I thought summarized it very well. Our armed forces kill to preserve life. We don't kill to just kill. That's what our enemies do. And whether you're talking about Sergeant Nicole Gee, who lost her life holding a child only days before and posting that on her own Instagram, or the images of the Marine reaching across the barbed wire and bringing an infant across. Those are the enduring images about what America is about. We're braving imminent danger to save human beings from a cruel fate at the hands of extremists, whether that's
not
Taliban
propaganda.
or ISIS or whoever. That's not propaganda. You can see it with your own eyes, and you can see them exhausted, but they still get up and do it until the mission is done. And that's something that, you can talk about the Taliban trying to do a mocking picture, imitating the Marines raising the flag on Suribachi. But the images that are going to stick, that I believe the world should etch into their brain, are the images of Americans doing everything they can to hold the gates open so that we can bring some people to a better future. So I'll start with that. The second thing is talking about the nature of the evacuation. There's plenty of blame to go around about how the conditions were set. I think the first mistake was giving a timeline, a date for our exit, and you can look back at the previous administration for that. But the facts on the ground that have occurred recently are solely on the hands of the present administration. And just because things go wrong, just because the Afghan National Army collapses, just because their president leaves, just because the Taliban moved a little faster, doesn't mean that you have to accept the facts on the ground as they are. You can make changes as senior leaders, as the United States of America, with the most powerful military in the world, and with the resources no one else has, to reverse the situation on the ground. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that's classified that we can't get into here. There are brave Americans, both the State Department and in the military, who are doing things to try to change those conditions. And there's a bit of a latency, a lead lag between what actually happens on the ground and when we hear about it. So there's some of that going on. The conditions at the gates, we're never going to know precisely by the moment exactly what's going on. And the negotiations that are going back and forth between us and Taliban leadership, we're only just hearing about now. But in the end, I believe there are going to be a lot of great stories coming out that are positive about things we did to make a bad situation a little bit more workable.
Yeah, Matt, and I'll be reporting on some of these things through Epoch Times. But, Matt, one of the things before we get to Turkey and the UAE, One of the things that really kind of bothered me this week was also seeing a Marine lieutenant colonel who posted a video online in uniform. It went viral. His rant was, I believe, very well versed. However, he did it in uniform, and because of that, the next day his superior officers came in and said, "Why'd you do it?" He ended up resigning his post, and he's put out another video that is also going viral today. Matt, it's a very thin line for those who are active duty to speak out, and it does seem appropriate for people to call for accountability. But what were your thoughts on this, and also what were your thoughts on seeing his response video, and what's your message? What do you have a message to those brothers and sisters who have worn the uniform in combat in Afghanistan and who have similar thoughts as this lieutenant colonel, possibly PTSD related?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in this. First, I saw the video. I listened to his thoughts, and I certainly am very empathetic to it. We wouldn't be in this situation with this lieutenant colonel if we had senior leaders who had stepped up and said something. Both when the plan was pushed that took away Bagram as an airport operation strategically, I wouldn't have done that. I do understand why they consolidated at Kabul, but I don't think that was a smart tactical or smart strategic decision to make. But largely what that Marine colonel was upset about was the apparent lack of leadership accountability at senior levels. Who among the four-star community, who among the secretariat would, with a responsibility to advise the President, National Security Council about policy, who stepped up and said, wait a minute, we're not seeing that. And because of that frustration, then you have the next tier down, colonels and lieutenant colonels, who finally had enough. And it appears that this guy looked at the decision-making calculus for himself and said, you know what, I'll bet my oak leaves on this. And he sat down and he made a video, knowing full well the apparent consequence. And he said in a follow-up video that he understands his chain of command relieving him, that he would have done the same thing if he were a senior leader over top of him. So he knew what was coming. But then he took a step further where he completely resigned his commission. And the guy had 17 years in, so to walk away before he got to 20, I'm not sure that that's a gesture that I think would achieve what he thought it might. That's sort of, to me, it's a self-inflicted, unnecessary additional damage to oneself. But that's his choice. I would say to other soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, both officer and enlisted, that you are still obligated to follow your orders so long as they are legal, lawful, and moral. If you get to a point where you're forced to make a decision, then you don't agree with it, then you have one choice, and that's to resign. I totally understand that, and I'll support you so long as you're making that decision for those reasons. But I would caution for those who are frustrated, who have some post-combat stress or maybe some PTSD, talk to your buddies a bit before you do something hasty. This is a morale kick. I get it, but be honest with yourself. Can you affect more change and more positive influence from within, or is your resignation truly necessary? It's tough. Every one of us had to make that call.
Right, Matt, and I echo what you say. It's a really tough call. I understand also why he decided to just fully walk away. That to me speaks of utter disgust and disappointment and complete disassociation with the current Marine Corps leadership. And he's trying to make a statement. I get it. And I get that and personally as well, an element of saying, I don't buy in to dishonor. And I am not going to take blood money in that sense. That comes from an emotional, visceral reaction. But like you said, the logical and the emotional oftentimes are combating one another, especially when you come from high octane stress environments. And so, I wish this colonel all the best. I do see in his reaction elements of PTSD. And I would ask that those who are listening right now, who know individuals who served during this war, very, very long war, who are possibly being triggered for this right now, to please reach out to them, do buddy checks in the next few weeks as we start to see the Taliban begin their, what we expect to be a very bloody takeover of Afghanistan. Now, Matt, when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation because I think it's really important for us to talk about who's taking the Afghan refugees outside of the United States, and specifically, what about the Muslim countries that surround Afghanistan? Are they taking them? What are their thoughts on Afghan nationals? One of the things that I think are really important to understand that there are layers to this. There's bias. I know in Pakistan, for example, Afghan refugees that have been kind of streaming across that border for years have been seriously discriminated against, and vice versa. There are elements to this that are complex and histories that are well older than the United States is. And now we're starting to see some movement of other countries getting involved who are bad actors. So talking about this is going to be important, getting knowledge on this. And then also, Matt, we're going to hit some other news that have happened this week. Reuters is reporting that North Korea has restarted a nuclear reactor. So we'll be talking about that over the break or in the next segment. And then we're going to also be talking about Hurricane Ida and some of the declarations of the president in the last few hours. Right now, set as a major disaster area in Louisiana. We haven't even seen the end of this storm yet. So stick with us. When we get back, we'll be talking more about the Afghan withdrawal. You are listening to Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events with myself and Matt Dooley. We'll see you on the other side.
Fundamentalists claim baptism by immersion is the only true baptism, because the Greek word baptizo, found in the New Testament, means to immerse. But is this true? The answer is no, and here are some reasons why. First, although baptizo is used for immersion, it can also be used for wash up, as it's used in Luke 11:38 in reference to the Jewish ritual washings. Second, we agree with our fundamentalist friends that full immersion best expresses the meaning of the sacrament. The Catechism of the Catholic Church makes this clear in paragraph 1239. But that doesn't mean non-immersion baptisms are invalid. In fact, the Didache, a first-century Christian catechism dating to around AD 70, gives instruction on how to baptize, stating, pour over the head 3 times. So if you weren't dunked, no need to fret. Immersion baptism is not necessary for a valid baptism. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Years ago, when I started acting, modeling, and singing in Mexico, my Catholic faith was not the center of my life. It took me many years to discover that success, fame, money, and all the pleasures of the world were not going to fulfill me. I got to a point in my life where I thought I had everything, but I realized something was missing. Thankfully, I began a faith journey that brought me back to God and home to the Catholic Church. You can too.
Discover more at CatholicsComeHome.com.
and welcome back to All New Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events with myself, Bree Dail, and Colonel Matt Dooley. And Matt, I'm looking at Twitter today because this morning I had been passed a horrible headline on Twitter, and we'll hit this real quick before we go back to what we were discussing before the break, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's out of the Salt Lake Tribune. Dated yesterday. Mitt Romney to the unvaccinated, quote, "Your liberty affects my health," unquote. I just find that is just, we found ourselves in like clown world at this point, where Mitt Romney is saying, your liberty to American citizens are affecting my health. Any kind of snippets that you'd like to add to that?
Well, my initial visceral reaction is probably not suited for mixed company. I would have to say that Mitt Romney hasn't had much relevance politically for about 6 years or so. If liberty affects, in his opinion, affects his health, perhaps he should stay home. He has that option.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's what many people have actually been saying online as well. So I think you're not alone in that. But going back to what we were discussing earlier, with the withdrawal, just to kind of wrap up. So news out today that Turkey is actually rejecting Afghan refugees, but the King of the United Arab Emirates is opening his arms to them. Why are you seeing, why do you think, like, for people who are kind of not really fully in understanding of the different layers and religious beliefs of the different Muslim sects, can you kind of give them a bottom line up front on why Turkey might be saying no, but UAE might be saying yes to these Afghans?
If I have to speculate to Erdogan's reasoning, here's a die roll. I would think he's probably concerned about another flood of refugees with yet a different ethnicity and a primordial soup of lots of different tribes in his country. It wasn't that long ago that Turkey had an influx of Syrian refugees. So there are Kurds of different tribal flavors. There are Sunni Muslims of different flavors, and Syrians, and of course Turkey is at the crossroads between Europe and Asia. There is a calculus to Turkey's management of its own concerns and its own economy and its own alignment that's different than other countries. And so I would have to guess that he's just uninterested in another problem, having had to deal with the influx of years worth of refugees from the war and the civil war in Syria. For the other countries that are out there, whether that's UAE or Saudi or Qatar or whatever, each of them have their own calculus based on the numbers of people they have in their own countries and the amount of money that would have to go to managing refugee centers and their own government capability and capacity to take care of these people. So in each and every one of them, you're going to see calculus in their decision making that's beyond just religious obligations.
Right. So, and it goes back to why the government, now there are many different reasons that are being put out. So please understand that this is still very, very fluid, but the American government wasn't just handing out these special visas to religious minorities in Afghanistan. Although, Open Doors, for example, which is a nonprofit that studies Christian persecution throughout the world. Afghanistan, I think, is number 2 in the world of places where Christians are the most persecuted, and it's such a minority of a very small minority of people. One would think that the United States and other European countries would identify those people as worthy of being protected as special refugees. However, we also worked with thousands of Afghan nationals who became very educated and became experts in their craft over the last 20 plus years. And we have seen those people earn and a special visa. And we are hearing, I just got a report from a friend who is a veteran, an Army veteran, who's saying right now, reports on the ground are that the Afghan Taliban are blocking special visa and Americans from reaching the airports. So we're still seeing this on the ground right now. So it's not over. And the government is obviously trying to work behind the scenes, but it's not as easy as one would think, and to pick and choose who lives and who dies, who comes to the United States, how we do the background check. I mean, the president has said every single person is going to have a background check. How do you background check people from a third world country like Afghanistan? I'm still questioning on that. But Matt, it's with all of this news, we're hearing other parts of the world also. There are things happening in other parts of the world right now that aren't really being covered. Events that are taking place in China, as well as that in North Korea and Korea. So we're going to switch to this at the towards the end of our show here. So Reuters is reporting this morning that the North Koreans have restarted their nuclear reactor. Does this come as a surprise to you, Matt?
No, not at all. It's the cascade effect of a weak regime here in the United States. They don't come in individual crises. They begin to cascade. When the rest of the world figures out that the United States is not as dominant or as interested in foreign affairs as they once were, you start to see folks with their own interests, whether that's economic or in becoming a regional power, begin to test the waters. We've seen that in the activity of the Chinese government, the activity of the Russians, and now North Korea again. I'm not surprised at all. In the end, we've seen this for years. Every time the world media is looking in some other direction, and North Korea feels like they're not being given due attention, and they'll go do something to get themselves back in the headlines. Ultimately, they're motivated by getting more aid relief and more food. They are the hermit kingdom, so it's not exactly like they have a booming economy, but they want the world's attention, and so I'm not surprised that they're starting this. Ultimately, the one thing that folks in that region and most of the world do not want is a nuclear capable North Korea with a bigger set of a nuclear arsenal or the capability of sharing those refined plutonium items with other less reputable folks out there in the world who would definitely want that stuff to use in their own bomb, whether it's active or a dirty bomb.
Such as, I don't know, the Taliban. One of the things I find really interesting is that we didn't hit this, but I'd like to really quickly as we close. Taliban, or known as ISIS-K, pretty much the same bad actors, trying to disrupt the flow of people, refugees, into the airport. And from what we're seeing now, Political reported this morning that the government had indication and warnings hours before this attack took place, that this was likely to happen, and they were trying to act on clearing out that particular gate, and just the people would not leave. And if the people were not leaving, then our Marines were guarding the gate. So can you kind of explain as we finish up here? ISIS versus the Taliban. Why?
Well, you're talking about folks who have a fundamentalist understanding of Islam, but vary on their timing and tactics and their goals, their aims. The Taliban are from that area, and prior to 9/11, were really only interested in running everything inside the borders of Afghanistan. ISIS is an attempt to export a fundamentalist Salafi jihadist mindset all over the world with the idea of finding and expanding a caliphate. And that's not the same goals as the Taliban. And so they've come in and they're seeking to do direct attacks on Westerners And it's not exactly in alignment with what the Taliban's trying to accomplish right now. They just want an exit of all foreign fighters, foreign armies, foreign representatives, whether it be contractor or government or otherwise, so that they can control Afghanistan and establish their authority. They need to stand up a government. They want to do things, as they say, better than the way it was 20 years ago. And ISIS coming in with their own ideological goals is counter to that. And so we're finding ourselves facing the fact that truth walks a crooked path in that region of the world. And we've had to work with the Taliban and they with us in sharing intelligence to try to cut these guys off at the pass. At any rate, I see a couple of different challenges in the future. The Taliban are going to figure out that having is not the same as wanting. Now that they've taken over and have to run and stand up a government, causing a revolution isn't the same as dealing with the aftermath of it if ultimately you get what you want and are able to take charge. There are a number of things the Taliban are having to compensate for. And one of those things is brain drain. The fact that folks are trying to leave Afghanistan who are the most educated, the most skilled, and the most capable. And none of those needs to preserve capability and capacity for a future government or a future economy are in ISIS's calculus at all. Ultimately, ISIS is looking at this in terms of an ideological fight all over the world, and they don't care about what the Taliban want, and that's the greatest difference. So it looks like we may be wrapping up here. I'll sign off for the both of us. Thank you for tuning in.